My name's Mike. If you haven't met me before, thanks for joining us at Parky today. We're going to reflect together on the Easter experience. That Friday began just like any other morning in Jerusalem. The weather was cool. Dew was on the ground. It was a beautiful spring day. Unusually, though, before dawn, there had been a gathering at the governor's house. There were priests, soldiers, the governor, officials. The governor had been woken early to deal with a judicial matter. The prisoner, Jesus, a Galilean, a well-known preacher and disturber of the peace, had been sentenced to death. And we should have now, the procession from the city to the hill of crucifixion began later, maybe 8 a.m. The prisoners, there were 3 of them this day, were taken out. Many people lined the streets to see the condemned pass by. You could see the prisoners had been mistreated. They bore the marks of beatings and the lash. Let's go to the next one. The soldiers made sure they kept going. A strategic blow with a club or a whip kept the procession moving. People looked on with horror, a mix of sadness and fascination. This is how the empire dealt with dissidents, any who were seen as a threat to the might of Rome. By 9 a.m., the prisoners were on the crosses. The one in the center had a sign above him that read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." It was written in Greek, in Latin, in Hebrew for all to see. The soldiers continued to keep order. Only a few words were spoken. The crucifixions continued, the suffering, the cries of pain. Around midday, a strange darkness came over the land. The sun was obscured. It grew cold and still. It could take many hours for a person to die by crucifixion. The crowd remained, watching, but hushed. About 3 p.m., the man on the middle cross let out a cry. "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani." It was lost on the soldiers. They didn't understand it. They'd heard of the prophet Elijah. Perhaps he was calling for divine intervention from him. The words were in Aramaic, the language of the people. Most people in the crowd heard and recognized what he'd said. They'd heard those words before. "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani." My God, why have you forsaken me?" It was the first line of a psalm, Psalm 22. A fitting call for a man who was suffering. Like many other prophets and freedom fighters, his cause was coming to an end. He felt abandoned by God. He challenged the system. God had not sustained him, it seemed. God had not come through with a victory that day. He and many others had believed his cause. Ultimately, though, his cause was due to fail. After today, he would be forgotten. Fitting words for a man in great physical pain and now filled with sorrow and regret. It was a noble thing to say. It showed that he was a religious man. He'd known and memorized the Psalms. He'd placed his trust in God. And now, as he passed away, even now, he turned to the Psalm for comfort, to express his sorrow with one last grieving expression of piety. These words theologically are known as the cry of dereliction. Jesus calls out to God in his distress. There is no response. He is seemingly forsaken, abandoned even by God. It seemed obvious to all that God was not present to give him victory this day. I want to share some reflections on what happened on the cross that day from the perspective of Psalm 22. So this one will show the darkness. Some of you will know recently my older brother, passed away in New South Wales. It was a difficult experience, especially he'd been in the final stages of cancer for a number of months. Thankfully, I got the chance to visit him several times before he passed away. As we visited him as a family, he was still at home. We would go into his bedroom. He couldn't get out of bed. And I noticed my father, who's 89, would not look at him. He'd look away. He would speak with him, but never face to face. The sight of his son in this condition was too much. I saw that on the day of the funeral also. We had photos and various things set out at Pat's funeral. But Dad looked away. It was too painful to a sight. Now, I didn't have that experience, but I know what it is to look away from something that is too difficult to see. There are times, even when I'm tired usually, where something comes on TV. It's a story of war or struggle or suffering, and something inside me turns away. I don't want to look at that at the moment. It's too difficult. I don't want to see the grief and the pain. And so I turn away. I wonder if you've ever had a similar experience. The scene is disturbing and we turn away. The picture on the screen shows the darkness that occurred for 3 hours that day. Was darkness a sign of the lack of God's presence? Maybe a representation of evil? After 3 hours of this darkness, the words came from Jesus. My God, why have you forsaken me? The darkness, the cry of dereliction, the sin of the world has been placed on his shoulders. And we might think because he cannot look upon evil that God would turn away from him. In many theological traditions, because of this rejection, because the Father has turned away from Jesus, this means he won't turn away from me. I can be forgiven. I understand that perspective. In many traditions, the significance of the words, my God, why have you forsaken me, is Jesus experiencing that rejection from God. In our time together, I want to lead us to an encounter with that cry of dereliction that might be a little different than you've learned or considered. Another perspective, if you like. The events of that day would have been confusing for many people. Jesus was a great teacher and preacher. He'd done great things. Just a few days prior to this, he'd been welcomed into Jerusalem to the cries, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. People were expecting something great. Could he be the Messiah? Could God's king finally arrive to set the people free? And now he's nailed to the cross and he comes out with these words, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why these words? I think it's helpful to think about some other words that I can say that might have a similar effect. I wonder what impact the words, there was movement at the station, have on you. What am I referring to? Am I talking about the railway station, a train's just come in and people are moving around? What am I doing by saying those words? If you've grown up in Australia, you'll realise those words have cultural significance. The words, there was movement at the station, of course, are the first words of the poem, The Man from Snowy River by Banjo Patterson. When I hear those words, there was movement at the station, what impact does it have on me? I think of horses. I think of mountains. I think of tough men. I think of early Australian history, of courage, of strength. In fact, I think of the whole poem when I hear the opening line. There was movement at the station. I'm not just saying those words, I'm evoking an experience, a whole reality behind those words. I suggest to you a similar thing is happening when Jesus speaks the words, my God, why have you forsaken me? The Jewish members of the crowd all recognized it. They knew this was the first verse of Psalm 22. Jesus knew this, that's why he used those words. What's he doing? He's evoking in them not just the first line, but the whole psalm. Jesus cries out these words in pain and suffering, yes, but also to let the crowd know what is happening. That the whole of Psalm 22 is about to be fulfilled this day. He wants them and us to think about the crucifixion through the lens of Psalm 22. What clues do we get from the psalm about what is taking place? Here are some more words from the psalm. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer. By night, but find no rest. So the first verses are focusing on abandonment, forsakenness, a cry from someone who feels that God is distant from them. He cries out to God, but gets no answer. This is the experience of the cross. It is physically painful. It is also emotionally and spiritually painful. A little later, we read these words, I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. This is someone scorned by the people, despised. He's being mocked for his godliness. Let the Lord rescue him. As people think about the reference to Psalm 22, they might recall in their minds that they'd heard these very words that day. In Matthew 27, we read the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders mocked him, saying, He saved others, but he cannot save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross. We will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now if he wants him. For he said, I am the Son of God. The mocking, the despising of the people. Let the Lord rescue him. Psalm 22 is letting us know the events in Jesus' suffering had been foretold with remarkable accuracy. A few verses on, I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is turned to wax, it has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. So the psalm tells us that his tongue sticks to the roof of his mouth. Didn't Jesus say, I'm thirsty on the cross? Again, it connects the pain of the experience with the psalm. His bones are out of joint. Crucifixion would result often in the arms being dislocated from the shoulders. They'd be heaving themselves up, trying to breathe, lifting your body. His bones are out of joint, visible to the onlookers, adding to his distress. We read on. Dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. Looking around, the soldiers had surrounded him. They'd nailed him. They'd pierced his hands and his feet. People remembered the psalm, and the events of the past 6 hours would be in their mind. The psalm was accurately predicting the things that were happening to Jesus. If you knew Psalm 22, you would see event after event from that psalm unfolding before you. Somehow what was happening had been written down 1,000 years before by King David. He'd written this psalm under the inspiration of the Spirit, prophetically, foretelling these events. By quoting the first line of the psalm, Jesus lets them in on the predictions of the entire psalm. This has been foretold. God's will, horrible though it is being done in these events. The soldiers had divided his clothes among them and gambled for his inner garment. Amazing. We read on further. But you, Lord, do not be far from me. You are my strength. Come quickly to help me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dogs. Rescue me from the mouth of the lions. Save me from the horns of the wild oxen. The psalmist is now committing himself to God. He continues to pray for deliverance. He continues to ask for help. He continues to pray for salvation. He still turns to God in his distress. So the psalm and Jesus have asked the question, why has God forsaken him? The events of the cross that was predicted beforehand, blow by blow. The prayer of the psalmist is also the prayer of Jesus. He prays for deliverance, for rescue, for salvation. And though help does not come immediately, for Jesus will soon breathe his last, his faith has not been extinguished. He's continued to trust in God all the way to the end. The events of the cross have been described by the psalmist 1,000 years before. Up until this point of the psalm, the events are talking about the physical activity on the cross. He was mocked, his hands and feet were pierced, he was thirsty, he's surrounded by violent men, his clothes are gambled for, and even his trusting in the Lord despite what is happening to him. The psalm then changes tack. It zooms out and begins to speak of another perspective. Thus far, it's followed the events of the crucifixion blow by blow. Now the psalm is going to tell us something else. Remember earlier, it said that he was rejected, scorned, and despised by the people. And from these events and the cry of forsakenness, we assume that he was scorned and despised by God. From the darkness and the events of the cross, it is understandable we would look upon this and assume that God has turned away from him. After all, is he not carrying our sin? How can a holy God look upon sin? then we arrive at these words. God has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. These words might be somewhat unexpected for us. I'm suggesting in quoting the first line of the psalm, in expressing his grief and anguish of what's happening to him, Jesus is evoking the memory of the entire psalm. I believe he gives at the cross, and by extension to us, a prophetic key, an insight into what is actually happening here. God has not despised or scorned him. It was the people who did that. They looked on and considered him stricken and afflicted by God. God has not despised or scorned him. God has not turned his face away from him. God has listened to his cry for help. Now, I know this messes with some of our theological systems. Many of us have grown up with the idea that because Jesus was carrying our sin, the Father who is holy must turn his face away from his Son. He cannot look upon sin. But Psalm 22, I think, is the interpretive key that Jesus gives us on the cross to help us see what is happening. These very words tell us that God has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. God has not hidden his face from him. God has listened to his cry for help. So what's happening then? As Jesus bears our sin, the Father is not hiding his face. The Father isn't turning away. The Father doesn't reach a limit to his capacity to be able to handle pain and sorrow and even sin. Unlike my dad at the funeral, and me at times when I just want to turn away from things that seem difficult and hard because I can't handle the emotional turmoil, the Father doesn't reach such a limit. He does not hide his face. He does not turn away. Certainly, Jesus cries out in distress. Certainly, he experiences anguish and frustration and isolation. He's experiencing the felt absence of God. This is common in people of faith through all the ages. The emphasis here in all this is that through this, even as he bears our sin and carries our sorrow, the Father has not hidden his face from him. This is the same Father who said to Israel, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. This is the same God. God's face is not turned away. For God never turns away. He never forsakes. And so it is with Jesus this day. The people had scorned and despised him. But God has not scorned or despised him. God has not hidden his face from him. God has listened to his cry for help. Praise God. This is the final part. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him. For dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. They will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to a people yet unborn, he has done it. What sort of language is this? The ends of the earth, the families of the nations. This is Old Testament covenantal language. God made a promise to Abraham that through a descendant of his, all the nations would be blessed. All the families of the earth would be blessed. In a covenant ceremony God made with Abraham, we're told that the sun set, Abraham went into a deep sleep, and a thick and terrible darkness descended upon him. Darkness doesn't necessarily mean the absence of God's presence. For Abraham, the darkness was the moment of covenant. It was the moment when God agreed with him that he would bless the world. David wrote, if all is dark around me, God, there is no darkness for you, for darkness and light are the same to you. God is making a new covenant. The ends of the earth will turn to him. All nations will bow before him. God rules over the nations. They'll proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn, saying, he has done it. Among the last words of Jesus on the cross are, it is finished. It is finished because he has done it. Praise God, he has not scorned or despised the suffering of his afflicted one. He has not turned his face away. He has listened to his cry for help. As a result, we have salvation. We have an assurance that God does not turn away. That even in our difficulties, our trials, and our sin, God is present even there. Whatever life has thrown at us, whatever life has taken from us, whatever we have done, Jesus bears all these things to the cross. The invitation to new life, to forgiveness, to restoration of relationship with God is offered to all. God has not looked away from Jesus. He will not look away from us. After this Friday, praise God, he has done it. Jesus had instructed his disciples before these events. They were to remember him in a specific way. They would take the elements of Passover, the bread and the wine. They were to eat and drink. They were to remember. And now, after the Friday, the elements have taken on their full meaning. Jesus has become the true Passover lamb. In his death, he has enacted a new covenant between human beings and God. Jesus was faithful to the end. He has become the perfect and sufficient sacrifice. God has seen this. He's not turned away or looked away from him, but has looked upon him, has heard his cry, will always look upon him as the faithful one. Today, we want to invite you to remember Jesus gave his life for our forgiveness. God has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He's not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. As a result, all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. Today we celebrate. It is finished. He has done it. So I invite you to come. We're going to come from the edges that way and then leave in the middle. The bread is gluten-free. Come and take the bread and the cup. As you return to your seats, reflect on the events of this day. Eat the bread in your own time. It is his body given for us. If you require someone to bring the elements to you, just raise your hand and we'll get someone to do that. And then we'll drink the cup together. So all are invited to come and remember what Jesus has done for us.